I would never invite you to my house to come stay for the weekend and ask you to bring a sleeping bag and have you sleep in the foyer of my home. And that's the same with parasites. They're not sitting by the exit or entrance door. They're deeply embedded in tissues, organs, glands. They're hiding, they're stealthy. And so trying to detect them just by looking at the stool, especially unprovoked without any sort of supplementation to rid of them, it's kind of like chasing your tail.
Welcome to the Resiliency Method, the truth about healing. I'm Dr. Erika, and we are here to uncover the root causes keeping you stuck. Together, we'll restore your energy, your focus, and your resiliency so you can finally heal, regenerate, and feel truly alive again.
Parasites were found in the Siberian permafrost. Scientists warmed them up. They came back to life. Carbon testing confirmed they were over 40,000 years old. If parasites can survive that, then they can survive inside of you. And they probably are. Welcome to the Resiliency Method, the Truth About Healing podcast. I'm Dr. Erika. And today, Dr. Drew Kidder is joining me for this important conversation. Now, Dr. Kidder is a chiropractic physician with over 20 years in clinical practice, extensive postgraduate training in functional medicine and clinical nutrition, and currently serves as the Vice President of Execution at Cellcore Bioscientists. He's one of the most respected names in foundational health. And the better question we're asking today, really, instead of asking, have I been exposed to parasites, are you asking if my body has the resilience to keep that exposure from becoming a problem? And today we're breaking down why stool tests miss most parasites, why killing without first opening drainage pathways makes things worse, and why the real question isn't how do we kill the parasite, but why was this body susceptible in the first place? Now, if you've ever thought parasites are only happening in developing countries, well, this episode is going to challenge that idea. And also, if you want to explore a parasite protocol approach, we have one called the Core Reset Protocol. It's available at www.drerikaonline.com/parasite detox. Check out www.drerikaonline.com/parasite detox and see the show notes for more details. Welcome back, everyone. Today, I am excited to bring you Dr. Drew Kidder. He is a doctor of chiropractic and also works with Cellcore Biosciences. Welcome to the show, Dr. Kidder. So excited to have you here today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Dr. Erika. This is fantastic.
Yeah, and today we want to delve into a really big topic and try to get this somewhat consolidated in the context of understanding some of the biggest challenges that a lot of people have with their health. And that is specifically around parasites. Now, Dr. Kidder, most people hear the word parasites and they immediately think that can't be me. That's like in third world countries.
Yep.
That's not something that really should be a part of my health picture at all. I live in America, right? Why do you think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that people can have about their health?
Oh my goodness. First of all, I think you should have music when you say parasites. It's like, dun, 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 super intense because it's an intense topic, right? It's a topic that a lot of people don't like talking about, and your point, unfortunately, I think we've unintentionally created this false belief that parasites are something that only affect people in developing countries, right? Third world countries, those with poor hygiene and poor sanitation. And the reality is parasites are part of the natural world, right? Mm-hmm. We share our environment with them every single day. And we look at exposures. I always used to kiddingly say, and within Cellcore, we have kiddingly said over the years, you want the greatest parasite test? Put these two fingers on your pulse on the opposite wrist, and if you have a pulse, you have a parasite, right? And I say that kiddingly. Yeah, it's not truthful, but the reality is we have exposure to parasites all the time. And that exposure can come from contaminated food. It can come from untreated water, right? Do you ever swim in any body of water that's not a chlorinated, brominated pool? Do you swim in rivers and lakes and ponds and all of that? So, water in our drinking water can also be, a source. Undercooked meats,
Mm-hmm.
pets, right? I have pets. We all love those of us that have pets. They go outside, they're in an environment that they may have exposure. They come right back in. We love on them. They walk on our carpets. They may jump on our furniture. We repeatedly tell them to get off the furniture, but they get back up. And so we're exposed through our pets. How about gardening and travel? Do you ever go outside of the US? How about
Absolutely.
insect bites? We know there are certain, exposures via insect bites. Even handling like the soil, getting our, hands, our fingers, our feet in the soil, going out barefoot, the exposure isn't unusual. Really, I think, Dr. Erika, the better question is like, have I ever been exposed? And I'm sorry, it isn't have I ever been exposed. It's more of does my body have the resilience? Do I have the ability to keep that exposure from becoming a problem?
Absolutely.
So, we're exposed to bacteria and viruses every day. Why do we not always get sick?
Right.
So we're exposed to parasites all the time, but doesn't mean we always get sick. So yeah, that's a misconception that, that can't be me. I live in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. And you often say it's not just about the parasite, it's about the host. Tell us more about what you mean by that.
It's really, I would say, probably one of the most important concepts, most misunderstood concepts, because, functional medicine, integrative functional root cause, foundational medicine, asks a different question, right? We ask, instead of saying, how do we kill the parasite? We also say, why was that person susceptible to the parasite in the first place?
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Two people can have identical exposures. One gets sick, the other one never develops symptoms. Why is that? Because susceptibility matters. We look at what's the status of our immune function, what is the health of our microbiome, right? That good balance between good bacteria, bad bacteria. What about that microbiome diversity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having good, overall flora. Things like stomach acid, bile flow, our nutritional status.
A lot of impact with or involvement with the thymus gland and the health status of the thymus gland, also creating such an immune suppression for the individual that these things are allowed to overtake too.
Yeah. And, we always talk so heavily about mitochondria. So what's the health of people's mitochondria? And is it also exposure to other things that are causing that suppression of their immune, function? What about general inflammatory status within the body? So it's
heavy metal toxins, things like that. Yeah.
right. Heavy metals, mold and mycotoxins, environmental toxins, the glyphosate, the atrazine, all of those things. So, our goal should really be to not just kill the parasites, but look at why we were susceptible to the parasite in the first place. What is that immune status, and how do we support the terrain so the body becomes much less, of a welcoming environment, if you will.
Let's just stay here for a second in terms of the context. We're talking about clinicians like you and I that acknowledge that parasites are a problem, or some of these things that are disrupting the terrain are a problem for people. And I don't know about you, but I feel like those are the best doctors when it comes to recovering health because they have that in their purview and they're acknowledging some of these external factors like toxins, like you said, mycotoxins, mold, parasites, heavy metals, some of these things that are we've all been exposed to some extent and to some combination, usually a unique combination for the individual.
Right.
But I think that that's really important to just stay there for a second and really highlight what we're talking about is a clinician that acknowledges these things and the presence of things over someone that might just be looking at labs to say, hey, you're B vitamin deficient. Let's give you a B vitamin.
Right.
What would you say about that, Dr. Drew?
Yeah, I think that's super, super important to look at. We've gotten into this world of, again, however we want to coin it, integrative functional root cause, foundational medicine, because we don't want that approach of the allopathic model, which is so commonly a pill for every ill. Right? You have elevated cholesterol. Don't worry, there's a drug to lower it. You have, low hormones. Don't worry, we can give you something, for that. We're not looking at the whole system. We're not looking at the fact that the human body is not designed to be these isolated systems.
Yeah.
They work cohesively. So to your point, is someone more, again, susceptible to a parasitic infection because their general immune status is dysfunctional, right? And
Absolutely.
is it because they are exposed to other toxins and toxicants? Are there other metabolic issues that are going on? And oftentimes, a parasitic infection may be that, for some people, that last resort. Oh, I've addressed all of these other things, but I haven't addressed parasites. And guess what? That can be that switch for so many people that the patients will say, no one ever talked to me about that.
Absolutely. It's huge, right? And a lot of times too, some of these things, if you're trying to do heavy metal cleanses, you're on the right track. You're going more to that root cause, the foundation. However, if there's still parasites, they can carry some of those things as well. And so it's really hard to overcome. We see clinically that it's one of the first things we need to address for the majority of people.
Right.
If not really 100% of them, really. And it's something that is a linchpin to allowing the body to really heal effectively. And that's what we're talking about. If you get to the root of these foundational things, you're unleashing that already innate intelligence in the body, which is designed to heal. Right.
Yeah.
And, like you said, a pill for every ill, we can move that viewpoint even over into the holistic natural medicine or functional medicine world and still stay at that, symptom level, I call it, that where we're addressing and we're using supplements or herbs, but we're still at a medicinal level with the body and we're treating some of the symptoms, maybe albeit without a drug or a surgery. Great. That's a win. However, you're still staying at chasing every symptom that comes about rather than going deep enough into the foundation and really trying to address what's got this body disrupted at an organ, tissue, gland, mitochondrial cellular level.
For sure. Yeah, I usually do expand that to go, we go from this allopathic model of a pill for every ill to a supplement for every symptom.
Yes,
Because,
right.
but it's natural, but we're still chasing symptomatology instead of understanding why that symptom is present in the first place. And how, oh, don't worry, you're not sleeping well, we'll give you melatonin. Oh, don't worry, but it's natural. It's safe. And you bring up a really, really good point when we look at how parasites can even harbor other infections, other toxins and toxicants. How often do people go, oh, I went on this detox to address the fact that maybe through lab work or whatever, someone identified that there was some level of toxic burden. So we're going to do a detox, but then they ebb and flow. They feel better for a while, but they never fully resolve. And is that because potentially you've eradicated a lot of that toxic burden in the body overall? But if those parasites are harboring toxicants as well, you're never fully resolving, because as those parasites go through their life cycle, they may be releasing more heavy metals.
Well, let's talk about that you said the operational word there is life cycle, right?
Yep.
And really gestational. And that's one of the challenges. A molecule of mercury isn't necessarily going to reproduce, but a parasite can.
Sure.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. And that's part of the equation.
Right. Well, it is, because even that points even back to testing and how, I've always had the motto, I loved testing, right? Test, don't guess. And I ran, when I was in clinical practice, comprehensive tests on my patients. But when it comes to parasites, there are a lot of different types of tests that can be done, right? We look at the fact that we can do PCR testing, we can do O&P, right? OVA and, parasite testing, that's more visual examination. We can look at antigen testing, all of those. But where are we looking at those in the life cycle of a parasite?
Right. Right. And a lot of
Also,
the parasite tests conventionally are stool tests too. So that's like you're you're looking for the evidence, as I always say it, at the front door or the back door, right?
yeah, right.
And ultimately, I would never invite you to my house to come stay for the weekend and ask you to bring a sleeping bag and have you sleep in the foyer of my home.
Yeah.
And that's the same with parasites. They're not sitting by the exit or entrance door. They're, deeply embedded in tissues, organs, glands. They're hiding, they're stealthy. And
Right.
so trying to detect them just by looking at the stool, especially unprovoked without any sort of supplementation to rid of them, it's kind of like chasing your tail.
Well, it is because, that's a great point. You look at what percentage of parasites are solely based within the digestive system versus those that are bloodborne, those that are, have migrated to the tissues, and we're never going to pick up on it. That's only one piece of the puzzle. I use mechanic issues, like if you got an engine problem, does looking up the tailpipe fix, is it going to identify that engine problem? No, you're probably looking at the wrong root of that. So yeah, you have to look at the specificity of what you're using to test. And sometimes multiple, forms of testing may be necessary.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on PCR testing for parasites?
Again, tool, right? I will say our testing modalities have improved significantly, right? But you're looking with that, you're looking at the genetic material, right? We learned a lot more about PCR testing over the past 6 years with some other, thing out there. And so good source, but not the tell-all.
Right.
So no different than, antigen, antibody testing, serum testing, all of that. So they're good tools, but guess what? It doesn't replace. It doesn't replace a good exam and history. What is the patient's symptomatic expression? They may present with all of these symptoms that we say may be associated with parasites, but have you ruled out the other potential causes of some of those symptoms as well?
What are some of those symptoms? Let's go into that next, Dr. Drew. What would you say are some of the things that people should be looking at as potential signals?
Oh my goodness. It's everything, right? It literally, parasites rarely announce themselves as a flashing sign of, parasites are present, right? Instead, they kind of contribute to patterns within the body. You may see people with persistent bloating, right? Not that occasional bloating that, it may be something that I ate, or I may be dealing with a little bit of a gastrointestinal bug, something like that. And maybe bug's the wrong word, but, a gastrointestinal virus. Alternating constipation and diarrhea without any type of dietary changes. Unexplained fatigue, just randomly, oh my goodness, I'm really, really fatigued. I wake up and think I slept well, but I'm dragging by 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. Things, iron deficiency can be a marker that is commonly seen with parasitic infections.
Yeah, I've even seen high ferritin in the context of and hemochromatosis patterns are a lot
Uh-huh.
of times, oftentimes parasitic in nature, stored deeply in the spleen and the liver.
Yep, for sure. You look at the other things when we talk about labs, we kind of typically will run, basophils, eosinophils, neutrophils. Elevated eosinophils can be a sign of a parasitic infection. Skin issues, right? Skin issues are always one of my least favorite, especially in more of the allopathic world, because from a dermatology perspective, skin issues, oh, just put something on the skin, it'll be fine, right? I'm a firm believer that, skin issues are an external manifestation of an internal
My
problem.
job, baby. Yeah,
Right.
for sure. Gosh, every time I see somebody with cystic acne, I just want to walk up to them and give them my card because I know how troubling that is for people and
Sure.
just like so evident, really what that is too. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the sleep disturbances, the itching. I mean, you can look at more
Mhm.
so in children, right? But what's one of the hallmark signs of like pinworms, anal
Yeah.
itching? You know, again, going back to a history. If all of a sudden you're seeing a patient that's presenting and they're expressing some of those, symptoms, have you recently traveled? Right?
Mhm.
And it's not always just traveling internationally, it can be traveling domestically that maybe your exposure was different, right? Did you
Mhm.
go on a lakefront, vacation with your family that you were in a body of water that you may have been exposed? So, yeah, that none none of those symptoms prove parasites, but when enough of the puzzle pieces kind of begin fitting together, they deserve consideration as part of our good comprehensive workup to go, maybe it could be parasites.
Yeah. And a lot of people are getting onto the ivermectin buzz and bandwagon and saying that, ivermectin should be used for everything. What are your thoughts on that? Especially in terms of, you're representative of a supplement company that
Mhm.
and I'm kind of a believer of, well, every drug is really created from some kind of an herbal blueprint anyways.
Right.
It's just that it's been patented and changed into chemical form
Yeah.
so that some people can make a real lot of money off of them, right? But
Right. Right.
ultimately, the body always recognizes and utilizes things of nature most effectively, which you guys have, I think, one of the best lines out there for dealing with parasite infections,
Sure.
among other things, right? Mitochondrial function, things like that. But what are your thoughts, just Dr. Drew, on that topic in particular? Because every time you turn around, if anybody knows anything about, what happened 6 years ago, some of the clinical results, there was some indication that those things helped. And
Yeah.
ivermectin is a antiparasitic
For sure.
drug by nature. Are you tired of treatments, protocols, and gurus who promise results but don't deliver? You're not alone. For years, I struggled with my own long-term illness, and I know how frustrating it feels when nothing seems to work. That's why I developed the Resiliency Method. It's a science-backed approach to combining the best of Western and ancient medicines to restore your body's natural intelligence. Patient after patient has discovered what's possible, living stronger, brighter, and more spiritually connected than ever before. Whether you're facing autoimmune issues, hormonal imbalances, weight struggles, or just feeling stuck, you don't need another quick fix. You need a clear path forward. Take the first step with a discovery call at drerikaonline.com/discovery. That's DRERIKA online.com/discovery. Or dive deeper with a full initial consultation at drerikaonline.com/initial-consultation. Because your health, your clarity, and your freedom cannot wait.
Very, very effective, right? But I think people also started using it and really going down the road of it's almost, when you're a hammer, everything is a nail, right?
Yeah.
That it really started pointing to, well, everything is a parasitic infection. And I don't agree with that, right? I think very often a lot of things can point to unresolved parasitic issues, but it's not as though that's the only cause. So to migrate to something, again, we're still looking at a more unnatural substance. While effective, it's just interesting to me that, people even take it prophylactically going, oh, it's good, right? Well,
Yeah.
what would we say if someone said that they were just taking prophylactic penicillin, right? We'd go, oh, that's good because maybe you're keeping some of the harmful bacteria at bay. But in the meantime, what are you doing with your good, healthy bacterial flora?
Right.
How much dysbiosis are you creating? So while there are not a lot of studies showing, negative impact of ivermectin, we don't know long term, right? And certainly
Right.
don't know long term. And it was never designed to be something that was taken on a consistent basis. Or people now that say, well, I just do, that once a month or once a quarter, that type of thing. So
Yeah.
again, has its utility, highly, highly effective, but potentially at what, other cost? And are there more natural alternatives, as you said, using, herbal extracts and everything that we know are very effectively antiparasitic?
Yeah, and I think what we're also talking about is a drug that's formulated in one particular way. And what we see from working with parasites often is they're in each individual might be harboring them in different locations inside the body. So you want to be able to evaluate too for adequate drainage support of
Right.
the parasite. As you kill something off in the body, drainage is essential so that you don't have symptoms of die off. And I'm not convinced that the drugs themselves are actually specific enough to support the body in that way. Whereas if you have some kind of herbal based program that's actually accounting and bringing in herbs to help with drainage and opening pathways, that's probably your most beneficial route
Yeah.
in that process. But I think it's also interesting to note, Dr. Drew, and this kind of goes back to the frequency that we started with. People that used ivermectin during that time period 6 years ago, they did see some resolution and recovery from a virus.
Mhm.
And I think that's a really important distinction to make that I don't think a lot of people really point out, is that it's not that ivermectin necessarily, in my mind, is a antiviral as much as it is a indication that so many of us are dealing with some level of immune suppression from parasite infections. So as soon as that goes in some way, either herbal or drug, there is some recovery and some support for the immune system to take some of that burden down. And now you can overcome that virus more easily.
Yeah.
So I think
100.
that's worth noting, right? I mean, because it does really speak to how potentially pervasive we're talking in terms of the
Yeah.
population.
Yeah. And you touched on something really important that, making sure that we're upregulating drainage pathways, right, that are commonly overlooked. And we may look at the fact that we want to just kill the parasite.
Mhm.
But it's not just a matter of killing the parasite, because what happens if we do not support drainage, if we're not opening up those pathways with, first of all, the bowels, right?
Mhm.
Making sure that people are having regular bowel function, that we have adequate kidney and liver function, that we have proper lymphatic, because
Mhm.
as you said, parasites may be living in tissues. They may be, impacting us at the cellular level. And if we're impacting that cellular debris, if our lymphatic system, if the glymphatic system, the brain is not able to move those toxins that are released by parasites and the byproducts through our elimination pathways, we're just going to continue to be sick. We're going to continue to
Definitely.
create a system, a pro-inflammatory system as well, because
Absolutely.
killing off parasites can add more inflammatory burden to our body as well. So going back to making sure that we prep the body to be able to properly, eliminate. So, you know,
Yeah.
we oftentimes talk about, like, you don't flush a clogged toilet, right? If
Right.
there if there's waste there, you can't just continue to add to it without opening up the drains to allow the flow of that. So again, that's your lymphatics, your liver, your kidneys, your bowels,
Mhm.
and also making sure that we have the mitochondrial support at the cellular level, allowing those organ systems to do their job. And
Absolutely. You can't send out the army if you really don't have a lot of mitochondrial energy.
Yeah.
So to take on something like a chronic parasite exposure, you need to have some energy to do that. And, just grabbing a product off the shelf and trying to willy-nilly it, and then trying to do that over and over again. Because it's worth mentioning that, doing antiparasitic cleanses over and over again, those are really cold, and a drug is especially cold. And any time that there's a chronic cold situation, you can aggravate it more, or a chronic deficiency situation, I should say. You can aggravate the cold retention in the body by continuing to overdo parasite cleansing, killing. So it's really important to note that too. That's part of the strategy you want, but then you eventually want to get the body to where, like you said, we can recover organ, tissue, gland, recover mitochondria, so we can get the body elevated, so it's not a perfect place for these things to overcome.
Right. Yeah. Don't create that beautiful host environment, because that's something that I always say too, is that we are amazing hosts for parasites. They will do, back to your point about the fact that parasites can absorb other toxins and toxicants. Why do they do that? Is that, ultimately a protective mechanism by the parasite, because they know they're doing really well living off of you. So if they're absorbing that toxin so that you're not impacted negatively, that's a win for them.
Absolutely.
And we could go into the whole how parasites can create cysts, how they can be involved with, maybe not create biofilm, but they can be intimately involved with biofilm in our body as a protective mechanism. Some of the crazy, when you really look at, again, outside of the bowels where everyone thinks that all parasites reside, you see the published documented cases of people who thought they had been diagnosed with a liver tumor, right? A brain tumor.
Yeah.
And they actually have surgery to remove that tumor, only to find that that was a cyst encapsulating parasites.
Yeah.
And if people don't believe it, if I was screen sharing, I would show, the cases of the brain tumors, the liver, cysts, the breast cysts. That
absolutely, all the time. Yeah.
Again, I don't want people to think that in any way I'm alluding to the fact, because I think that can be a muddied, topic, that people go, ooh, parasites cause cancer. No, it's, now, can they contribute to it? Because are they causing immune suppression like we've talked about? Yes. But it's more of the misdiagnosed tumors that people have that can actually be cystic forms of parasites. Protecting.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. What a cyst really is. You mentioned the word encapsulate, right? The body's designed to survive. So it will do some pretty cool things to keep you alive. So if it's something that is foreign, it doesn't like, it will put a wrapper around it.
Yeah.
So that looks like tumor, cyst, nodule, lipoma, depending on the surrounding tissue and the location of where it's needed, right? It'll use the material resonant to that area to encapsulate. So it's a brilliant design, right? But the problem with those things is, once you have a wrapper around something, you also have a lack of blood supply, healthy, fresh red blood cells bringing in white blood cells, and macrophages to help deal with this situation. And then over time, that lack of flow becomes an obstruction, becomes more serious.
Right.
But absolutely, you mentioned the breast stuff. I also like to put in there too, like endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndromes. Oftentimes we're talking easily, I mentioned the hemochromatosis patterns. There's so many things that we see pretty chronically in our society these days, where there has, where clinicians like you and I have identified that as a part of the picture. Now, you did kind of allude to some of this, but love to hear some additional stories. And I want to mention for listeners too, in the show notes, we have access to a course set. We can give you access to a course set reset protocol that we use as a part of CellCore's program is inside of there, as well as some pictures of things that we've seen clinically. So if you're into the gore and you can stomach it, we will give you some access because the proof is, the proof is there. And I think it's important to make this stuff real for people.
Yeah.
So if you are somebody that's interested in that, but love to hear your stories, Drew, on what you've seen clinically too.
Oh, I think even just not what we have all seen with patient, because it's crazy. Once practitioners start addressing parasites on a more regular basis, this thing starts to blow up. Our phones blow up with all the photos,
Yeah.
that patients are sending. That's why one of the reasons I love when practitioners do group programs
Mhm.
around, things like a parasite cleanse
Mhm.
is, they start sharing them internally as well. But, I have put enough parasite talks together over the years, and I don't put the pictures in there for shock factor. I put them in there just as recognition of this isn't just us as a group of woohoos that go, ooh,
Right.
it's parasites. They're documented, right?
Mhm.
And even as we said, the resilience of parasites, I don't know if you saw, I think it was almost 10 years ago now, they found parasites in permafrost in Siberia.
Oh, interesting.
They put those parasites into a petri dish and allowed them to naturally warm up. They did some type of carbon testing on these parasites and determined that they were over 40,000 years old. Now, talk about
Yeah.
resilience, that
Yeah.
those parasites were able to live in incredibly harsh environment, just like in many ways areas of our body that can be very harsh environments that we would think that parasites could never survive. But what does the body do to wall them off, to protect it, encapsulate it, create that matrix? But then can they also be very stealth and protect themselves? So I thought that was a
Yeah.
crazy story. I've seen the story of, you know, young children who complain about digestive issues to then do, some exploratory, I don't necessarily know surgery, but, identify masses of parasites within the digestive system. We've seen the stories. There was even years back, it was on like the Today Show or one of the mainstream media outlets that was a woman that had been diagnosed with a brain tumor. And again, come to find out, when they removed that brain tumor and as they typically do in pathology, opened it up and were like, oh my goodness, this was a mass of parasites. So they aren't, again, not to beat a dead horse, but
Right.
they're not just in our digestive system like we think, ooh, tapeworm, digestive
Mhm.
system, roundworm, digestive system. They have the ability to move systemically.
And they do.
And
Yeah.
they do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's about survival. Good. And then also, I think it's worth mentioning too, because I get a lot of nervous system cases too. And a lot of times, this stuff is embedded deeply in the nervous tissue.
Yeah.
You mentioned the brain, but also even along the entire nervous system. So think the spine. And then that impacts through neural networks to the major organs and organ systems on the front side of the body. That impacts their ability to thrive and do well too, which
Yep.
then also creates an environment where these things can lay dormant. So it's all connected and it's all up for grabs if you're dealing with and encountering these things, which
Yeah.
you probably are. Now, just to wrap up this conversation, Dr. Drew, what would you say is a better question that people could ask themselves about this particular topic to think more critically?
I think it's not just a question, but like one thing to remember is we shouldn't address this topic. Stop thinking about, parasites from a place of fear, because it can be one of those things that people are incredibly fearful of the parasitic topic, right?
That's a good point. Mhm.
Practitioners are fearful of it. in addressing it with their patients because they don't want it to be looked at as some, hocus pocus, woo woo, parasites. But then patients, clients can be very fearful of the parasite topic. So instead, I encourage people to think about like the resilience, right? Here's the reality. Parasites are real. Exposure is real. But, it's so is the intelligence of the human body, right?
Right.
That's real. So our goal isn't to become obsessed with every organism that we encounter, that we're exposed to. Our goal should be building a body that is, resilient, that has the ability to address, these foreign invaders. So what is that? It's healthy digestion. It's healthy mitochondria. It's a strong immune function. It's all of the things, Erika, that we go, you can't underestimate the power of good sleep and balanced nutrition and movement and stress management. You mentioned the nervous system, right? Not only can parasites be infiltrated within the nervous system, they can impact our nervous system.
Absolutely.
So is sometimes anxiety and depression and things like that, can there be a parasitic contribution to that? So I always like to leave people encouraged, and I think people should be encouraged that, yes, address it. It's something that we should absolutely be aware of, be cognizant of, but don't be fearful in, addressing it.
I love that you bring that up for sure, because you're right. It is one of those things can be overwhelming, but just find the right clinician to work with in that context. It's something that you can move through. It's an important feature of recognizing in your total health picture, and just find someone that can really help you get through that, get on with it. That's the other thing is I want to stress the importance of moving beyond some of these things to get to deeper levels of healing in the body. And that's where your power's at, people. It's not in worrying about everything you're going to get exposed to or the things that you can't control that are coming at you. Sometimes in the context of health, we get a little wrapped up in those things. And I love your point, Dr. Drew, in that it really starts here, but you have to start here. You can't just wait around for the shoe or the other shoe to drop, when it comes to your health. Nobody today gets a free pass when it comes to their health. I don't care who you are. I don't care how good your diet is. I don't care how much money you have, how little money you have. If you aren't addressing the core thing that makes your life determine your quality of life, your health, you're not playing the game at all with all cylinders firing, So get into the driver's seat, right? Get empowered and take control of the scenario with your health. Don't be a bystander and at the cause of others around you.
Phrase I've always used is ignore your health and it will go away.
I love that.
That's reality. And I also want to encourage people too, just the absence of symptomatic expression doesn't mean, like we said from the beginning, doesn't mean that we know there's always exposure. We talked about all the exposure sources. But I think it's also important for people to maybe consider doing a periodic parasite protocol, because if we think about it, Dr. Erika, we do it with our pets. Other cultures do it regularly because of exposure. Again, yes, they may be dealing with, environmental issues, sanitation, hygiene, everything else that may cause increased exposures, but we're not immune to that exposure. So do we want to be preventative? Or do we want to wait until the problem manifests and then address it? So
and work with a clinician that can monitor you for exposure.
100%.
I think that's an important feature of any sort of good maintenance program with your healthcare practitioner. And that's the thing too. You don't want to be done with a healthcare practitioner. You want somebody in your pocket on your team, especially high performers know this. They know the importance of having a team of support around them. And one of the things that they do is oftentimes have a clinician like you or I on their bench to help them with their health and dealing with these things. So find out who that individual is, put them there and keep them there. Because to your point, it's not a one and done situation. And I always tell people when they first come in, I'll read the saddest, a list of 25 to 30 symptoms that somebody is sitting in front of me having. And after I read them, I'm like, yeah, and by the way, you're the lucky one. Because to your point, Dr. Drew, is people that aren't having a lot of symptoms or feel like their symptoms are low enough that they can manage them day to day are not the lucky ones. Because
Right.
it's the person with the symptoms that's actually taking action on your health. And back to my earlier point, nobody gets a free pass.
Right.
So if you're not taking action because you feel like you don't have a lot of symptoms, that you don't know what you don't know is your worst enemy.
100%.
Yeah. Good. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Drew. Great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning into the Resiliency Method, the Truth About Healing podcast. If this episode spoke to you, follow, share, and leave us a review. Are you ready to go deeper? Book your discovery call now at drerikaonline.com/discovery and take your first step today.